everybody, and welcome to the Fit Life Podcast. My name is Jacqui, and I am your host. Um, this week, we are going to be talking about the science of fat loss and what you can do to make fat loss easier, and how you can kind of audit yourself to ensure your progress, or maybe if you're feeling a little bit stuck with your progress, these are the things that you should look out for. Some of the things we're going to be discussing today are not only applicable to fat loss, but they are adaptable and things that you can kind of like customize to whether or not you are pursuing fat loss or being at a maintenance or like trying to build muscle and things like that. So before we dive in, I just wanted to say thank you so much to those of you who have been listening, who have been supporting me in this kind of journey of starting a podcast. It has been quite a ride so far, and I'm really loving all the things that I've been learning about, you know, hosting something like this, having good quality like context and being a better speaker and things like that. And these are all things that I'm trying to work on and improve in myself, not only as a coach, but as like a content creator and getting the information out there. So whenever you have a second, I would really appreciate if you could leave a 5-star review or like share an episode that you really enjoy or anything like that, because it's not just helpful for me to see that feedback, but it's also helpful for like discoverability and for other women who might be looking for the same information that you're looking for. So any little bit really helps, and it just takes a couple of minutes to do. So thank you so much for ahead of time if you are somebody who is doing that, or yeah. So anyways, today sorry, I have been sick this week. So if I sound a little bit funny or if I need to take a pause to have a drink and things like that, that's definitely why. Um, yeah, so let's dive in. So I'm going to start out by kind of giving like a really, hopefully minimal breakdown of kind of the science of fat loss and what we kind of need to consider in order to understand what happens when we lose fat and how our body uses energy that is going to then result in fat loss. And I think that's really important to understand, because a lot of people don't have a full understanding of that, and they end up looking for these quick fixes, or they think that something is wrong with them. So when we uncover like what happens when we lose fat, or what kind of things our body uses energy for, then we're going to have a better understanding of what the whole picture looks like, instead of zeroing in on one maybe said part of what happens when we lose fat, or what we need to look at when we lose fat. um and the same kind of thing goes with like these other phases that we might want to be looking into too. So if you're looking to stay in maintenance, or you're looking to gain muscle or things like that, like these will be adaptable to those other phases. So I have so if you're watching me on video, you're going to see this. I have a really sad kind of diagram of what this looks like. You'll probably be laughing at me, but honestly, I put this together in like 5 seconds. So that's, but it's going to do the trick. So essentially, if you see this screen, you'll see that I have a circle, and it's divided into a few different categories. And what this circle really encapsulates is your TDEA. TDEE. So that stands for your total daily energy expenditure. And I know this is going to sound a little bit boring, but honestly, like keep listening because it's really important. So you might have heard of coaches refer to your TDE and probably are not really fully understanding of what that is. So what your TDEE this is all the places that your body uses energy for. So you'll see on if you can see my chart, I'm going to try to be as descriptive as possible. So if you're only listening, keep listening. So the biggest part of the circle is more than half. It's more than half of the whole kind of pie. And this makes up of 70% of your TDEE. And what this is your basal metabolic rate. So it's your BMR. What your BMR is the amount of energy that your body uses towards just living. So breathing, your brain activity, your ability to just live. Everything that's going on at like a cellular level to make sure that you're living goes towards 70% of your energy expenditure is going towards that. there's so much going on that needs energy that we don't really like take into account, like even the process of thinking, like having like thought clarity and brain activity, the ability to breathe, the energy that your heart needs to pump your blood, like those are all things that require energy. And so when we are an individual person, 70% of whatever energy your body consumes is going towards that, first and foremost, right? We've talked about in other episodes how your body's main objective is to keep you alive. And this is a very primary example of that. Um, and this is also why that even if you are a sedentary person, it's absolutely like um ugh, my brain activity needs some energy if apparently. It's absolutely possible for you to lose fat even if you're a sedentary person. Will it be easy to lose fat if you're a sedentary person? Probably not, because you're going to have to eat quite a bit, like small amount of calories in comparison to if you're an active person, but it's still possible because your body is still using energy. And as long as you are consuming calories under that energy requirement, you're going to lose fat. The other part that you can kind of see is the next biggest part called your NEAT. I'm trying to do this backwards, so I'm trying to find where I'm pointing. So NEAT is NEAT, and that stands for your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And I know this is just a fancy term, but essentially what that means is that's 15% of your energy expenditure, and that is all the movement that you are doing outside of exercise. So non-exercise activity thermogenesis, meaning that any movement that you're doing that is not intentional exercise that you're setting aside in the day is making up 15% of your energy expenditure. So, seeing your BMR just to survive, 15% of your energy goes towards your NEAT, so how much movement you're getting in a day. And we will kind of define the difference between movement and exercise in a second. Um, but that's a big chunk. That's a big chunk of your energy. The next, the next, well, I guess I'm going backwards here. I've done 70%, NEAT takes up 15%, your TEF takes up 10%. So TEF is thermogenesis, your thermal, oh my gosh, I'm totally blanking on what this is. Your thermal effective food. That's what it is. So thermal effective food is the amount of energy that it takes your body in order to break down the food that you're eating. Um, Digestion takes energy. It takes effort on your body's behalf in order to break down the food and use it and excrete it and all of those things. So your digestion and the thermal effect of food um, counts towards energy expenditure, and that's 10%. The least amount of energy expenditure is probably going to surprise a lot of you, but that's your EAT. So that is your exercise activity thermogenesis. So your daily exercise routine, so like an hour of your day, maybe half an hour of your day, whatever it is only 5% of your total daily energy expenditure. So this is going to explain, I'm going to come like reference back to this chart as I kind of talk about the other things that kind of contribute towards fat loss, and so that we can kind of understand why this is so important to know and what we can do to make fat loss so much easier for yourself. So understand that this chart kind of breaks down how your body uses energy that you require as an individual. In order to lose fat, we need to eat less calories than what our body is expending. So, when I'm talking about your energy expenditure, we're talking about caloric expenditure too, because calories are a unit of measurement for energy. And when we talk about calories and consuming calories, we are talking about consuming energy that our body is then going to use towards your total daily energy expenditure, your TDEE. And this is the breakdown of how it's going to kind of use those energy sources and where it's going to prioritize that. So keep this in mind as we kind of continue through what we need to do in order to lose fat, and how we can kind of manage our expectations of what this is going to look like and what's going to help us with this. Um, I get a lot of women who come to me and they're like, I've been doing everything and nothing works for me. There must be something wrong. And I think a lot of it has to do with the awareness around certain aspects of our life that we might not have considered before. Um, so first and foremost, when it comes to fat loss, everyone's going to be like, really, Jacqui, like this is the most obvious part. But when it comes to fat loss, again, It's all about calories in versus calories out. And although that sounds like a really, really simple um, method or like equation, I guess, um, it's not as simple as it sounds because there's so many things that influence whether we stay in a calorie deficit or not. And that's where a lot of women really struggle with, especially people who are highly stressed or maybe have office jobs and things like that. This is why I'm going to go through and kind of explain the different things that will make fat loss harder or easier for you. And these are all things that you can consider. And they're all things that you can also kind of audit in yourself as well. So if you're finding that maybe you're not having as much progress as you want, or it's not going as fast as you want, these are all things that you can look at in order to kind of like audit yourself and be like, okay, what is happening here and how can I move the needle forward for myself? So, first and foremost, the most obvious piece is that you need to be in a calorie deficit. That's just a hard and fast, black and white kind of thing. Um, and there might be women out there who are listening to this and they're going to be like, well, that's not true because the calorie deficit didn't work for me. And you're the person that I want to keep listening because it is true for everybody. It's just that certain people are influenced in a way that is going to make a calorie deficit a little bit more difficult for them based on health factors, hormones, lifestyle, and things like that. And that's what I really want to dive into today. So, if you are somebody who is trying to be in a calorie deficit, if you are tracking, which I highly recommend you do, because even if you track for a few weeks, it can be very, very eye opening to kind of see, like, learn about your food. What kind of things are you consuming? How many calories are they made up of? What's the macronutrient breakdown? All of those things are really important to really consider. If you are tracking, I want you to be really intentional about looking at your food and learning about it, not just willy nilly entering everything in and then wondering why you're not hitting your calories. Um, so that's just something that a lot of people do. They're just not really intentional about it, and then they wonder why it's not working. One thing I will note is I do not love the MyFitnessPal calorie intake calculation. It's usually very, very low and not usually very sustainable for most people. Like I've seen people get an estimate of like 1,200 calories, and that's generally not always the most sustainable way to do it. I would recommend finding a calculator online to calculate your TDEE, which is what I just discussed. And then what you're going to do is you're going to subtract 500 calories from that total number. So, why we do this is because 3,500 calories equals 1 pound. And if you have a weight loss goal of losing 1 pound a week, which is relatively sustainable, that equals subtracting 500 calories a day. So 500 times 7, so for 1 week equals 3,500 calories. So that is like the goal of 1 pound. So if you're taking your total daily energy expenditure and you have that figured out because you know how much you move, you know how much you weigh, and all of those things, like if I guarantee you, let's just Google TDEE calendar or calculator, and it'll have all these things set out for you, and it'll calculate the total daily amount of calories that your body would need in order to maintain its current weight. So if you're in a maintenance phase, that's all you need to know. You just need to know your TDEE, and that's essentially the amount of calories that you're going to be looking to eat every day in order to maintain the weight that you're at. But if you want fat loss and you want upwards of a pound to lose a pound a week, you want to make sure that each week you are eating 3,500 calories less than what your body needs. So, again, you're going to take your total daily energy expenditure number. So, that's the amount of calories that you need per day. And you're going to subtract 500 calories, and that's going to put you in a calorie deficit. And now it's not always as straightforward as that for everybody. There's definitely people who will need a bit more consideration depending on like their lifestyle and things like that, but we're going to dive into that. Um, so that's essentially where I would want you to start. And in order to make sure you are staying in that calorie deficit, there's a few tweaks that we can make when it comes to actually tracking and make sure that you're doing so as accurately as possible. It's really important to stay accurate because there can be so many things that happen and that can add up over the course of the day that will pull you out of a calorie deficit or put you more in like a maintenance, and then you're not going to see the progress that you want to see. So when you're tracking your food, if you are, make sure that you are tracking like everything. Everything that goes into your mouth, make sure you track it. That includes anything, any bites, licks, and sips. Those are small things that you might in the moment be like, oh, this doesn't matter, doesn't count. But those add up and you will be really, really surprised. I would also highly recommend um, weighing your food. Weigh it out by grams, weigh it out by ounces, but grams are usually a little bit more accurate depending on how small the portion sizes are. But so if you're having like a smaller portion size of something, grams is going to be more accurate. But yeah, throw out the tablespoons, throw out the cups, throw out the serving sizes, throw out the pieces. Just weigh your food, and you'll be so surprised to see how little bits again like add up. I actually did an Instagram reel a few months ago, literally showing you that I was having chocolate covered blueberries for snacks, and on if you read the back of the ingredient label to see what a serving size looks like, it says 16 pieces, and then in brackets it would say like, I think it was like 40 grams or something like that. And in the video, I counted out 16 pieces as I had the bowl on a scale to show everybody that 16 pieces does not always equal 40 grams or whatever that serving size was. It actually, I think in my video, it actually ended up being like 52 grams. And because chocolate is a pretty calorically dense like food, that extra 12 grams added up to like 50, like 50 grams, or sorry, 50 calories. So 50 calories more than what I thought I would have been eating had I only counted out 16 pieces of these chocolate covered blueberries. Now, if somebody like maybe like a one off, like, okay, extra 50 calories, that's not a big deal. But if that's how you're weighing out or like how you're calculating all of your food, it's going to add up. And if all of a sudden, like, 50 calories here, 100 calories here that you're not accounting for. And over the course of the day, all of a sudden you're eating more of it out of maintenance and you're not actually in a calorie deficit. So it's really important, especially if you're just starting out, to try to get as accurate as possible and get a really good read on your food and what you're consuming so that you know for sure that you are in a calorie deficit. Um, and I'm telling you this not out of like being strict or being restrictive or anything like that. It's just that nobody really loves to be in a calorie deficit, and you want to be able to do it for as long as possible, especially if you have a lot of weight to lose. Um, but so knowing these things is going to allow you to go in and get out of that calorie deficit as soon as possible. So that way you're not like feeling stuck and frustrated in a calorie deficit that doesn't seem to be working for you. Um, so yeah, we definitely want to track our food and get a good read on what we're eating. We want to track as accurately as possible. We also want to be as consistent as possible. So this is another thing that I see a lot of is, girls will be like, "Oh, I was in a calorie deficit all week long." And then you look at their food log and you're like, "Well, you've actually only been in a deficit for 4 days this week because every other day you've gone like 3 or 400 calories over your deficit." And then they kind of have to like take a step back and be like, oh my gosh, I actually thought like I was close to my calories, or it felt like I was doing it more regularly than I was, or whatever it is. It's really important to get a read on your consistency as well. The other thing that I see a lot of too is that there'll be girls that will eat really, really well through the week, and they might even start to like try to cut down on their calories even more because they think that doing that is going to be faster and they're going to see the results faster, which you may if you can be consistent with it. But by the time they come to the weekend and they're going to social events, or they're going out with friends, or they're going out for dinner, or whatever it is, then it becomes just a big free for all because they've been so restrictive throughout the week that now on the weekend they're like, "Oh, I am just going to like it's just one meal. It's okay." And then it turns into like, "Oh, well, it's just a snack. It's okay." and all of a sudden they're eating way, way, way over their calorie deficit over the weekend, which then on average, like over the course of the week, has now put them into more of a maintenance because they overconsumed that much on the weekend. So this is really important as to like why when you look at a calorie deficit, you want to be eating as much as possible while staying in a calorie deficit rather than trying to eat as little as possible and trying to be in a calorie deficit. When we're eating as much as possible and having like a smaller, more sustainable calorie deficit, you're going to be able to be more consistent with it. And then the more consistent you're going to be with it, the quicker the results are going to be. Um, so that's essentially the goal, is just understanding that no, you're not going to lose 5 pounds in a week. If you do, you're the anomaly. Anomaly? No, anomaly. Anomaly. Um, yeah, and that the quicker your fat the quicker your weight loss is going to come, the less sustainable it's going to be. And like it's just not always worth the trade-off. So that's the other thing too, is like understanding what the trade-offs are of going into a really, really strict calorie deficit, and understanding how much you're going to have to cut out of your diet or to make this work. um, versus when you have the kind of the food freedom and the flexibility with a higher deficit, or with a deficit that is not as deep, you're going to be able to make room for the foods that you really like. You're not going to feel as restricted, and it's just going to be a little bit more enjoyable in that sense. So if you are doing all of those things and you're still not seeing results, you still might not be in a calorie deficit. And there's going to be a few things. I have 6 things that I'm kind of going to discuss in terms of like what you should be looking for that could be influencing the behaviors around being in a calorie deficit. Um, so if you're tracking your food and you're weighing everything accurately and you're doing this consistently, and you only have maybe like 1 or 2 days here and there where like you're not in a calorie deficit, then that's amazing. You should be seeing some progress. However, if you're not being truthful with what you're eating, like, and this happens a lot when people are just like not honest about what they're eating, and they think that some things don't count or whatever it is, you're you know um cutting yourself short by doing something like that. um and if you're not tracking and trying to lose weight, that is also another thing that a lot of people try to do, which is fine. And it's absolutely possible to lose weight and with not tracking, but it's still understanding that you need to be in a calorie deficit. It's just going to be a little bit more difficult to know if you are in a calorie deficit versus those people who are tracking consistently and accurately, in order to lose fat. If you're not tracking, I do want everyone to know that just because you're eating clean does not mean you're in a calorie deficit. So, clean eating is great. It's really great for a lot of different reasons, and feeling good and having energy and helping with digestion and all kinds of things. But you can eat clean and still eat at maintenance or even a surplus. It depends on what you're eating. It depends on how much you're eating. But the act in itself of switching all your foods to like whole clean foods is not necessarily going to help you lose weight, because you can still absolutely overconsume in calories if you even when you are eating clean. So think things like meats, oils, butters, all those things are still nutrient dense, but they have a higher fat content, which in turn makes them a more calorically dense than what you might anticipate. So again, like this goes back to tracking and understanding like where those calories are come from and what a serving size actually looks like and all of those things, because it can be a tool to help you even when you're not tracking. So getting that understanding of your food is really, really crucial. The next thing that I want you to look at is your sleep and your stress management. So, these are two things that I think kind of like fly under the radar when we talk about not just fat loss, but health in general. When you're sleeping like shit and you're not managing your stress, you feel like shit. And it's so much harder to control cravings. It's so much harder to be satiated with your appetite. A lot of people use food and drink as a clutch to manage their stress or to feel more awake or whatever it is. When you are sleeping well, and your stress is under wraps, which I know is way harder, it's easier said than done. But if those are two things that you're really prioritizing, you're going to feel so much better. You're going to have less food cravings. You're going to have an easier time dropping weight. And there's a number of reasons for this. Stress and sleep, sorry, when your body is sleep deprived and stressed out, your body is going to tend to have more inflammation. And all inflammation means, because if people hear the word inflammation, they're like, oh my God, I'm so inflamed. Inflammation just means that your body is holding on to water. That's all it means. And it's just like a body's natural response when it comes to stress. So, if you're chronically stressed out or you're chronically not sleeping well, you're going to hold on to more water weight. And that's why the scale is going to be a little bit more stubborn to come down. Um, so moms who are not sleeping well, maybe people who are just not really implementing stress management like mechanisms and things like that, you're going to have a little bit of a harder time. And it's not to say that it's not impossible. It's totally possible. It's just a little bit harder. You just have to be more aware of how the lack of sleep is impacting you, how your stress is impacting you, what your kind of responses are to those things, but getting aware of like how those things are affecting you and how they're affecting your ability to make decisions that are in alignment with your goals, how it influences your appetite, which is a little bit different from hunger, by the way. Appetite is more so like a social emotional thing, whereas hunger is actually like a physical cue. We might have an appetite for something but not actually be physically hungry, right? So there is a little bit of a difference, and having an influence on your appetite is different than a little bit different than hunger. So managing sleep, like if you are, even if you're a new mom or a mom who has kids that doesn't sleep really well, be mindful of that. And I know and I get it that at nighttime when your kids are in bed and you're finally alone, like that alone time is so like is heavenly. But also don't take that alone time and have it become a detriment to your sleep patterns either. I have more like, so it's a side story, I guess. My husband gets up at 3:30 in the morning because he needs to be at work for 5 o'clock. So he gets up at around like 3:45, showers, gets ready, and so he's out the door after a little bit after 4. And he goes to bed at 8 o'clock. My son, my 4-year-old son, goes to bed around 8 o'clock as well. And I started going to bed at 8 o'clock, and I won't go to sleep at 8 o'clock. I will like lay in bed and read for about an hour until about 9 o'clock. And when I tell you that when I started doing this sleep routine, instead of staying up until like 10 or 11 watching Netflix, I have so much more patience and energy for my kids because I'm actually getting a decent night's sleep. I'm actually putting my phone away. I'm actually doing something that is allowing my brain to kind of disconnect from all the things that I'm thinking about through the day. I'm getting a good quality of sleep. And I mean, I have times now where my kids will be awake and I'm the one getting up with them and stuff like that. And that now that I'm past the newborn stage and that my kids are sleeping more regularly, when they aren't sleeping regularly, I feel the difference so bad. So now to see like both sides and like experiencing both sides and how they influence me when I'm not sleeping well and I'm having a lot of interrupted sleep, that really puts a damper on my ability to make decisions that are in alignment with my goals. I feel like I want sugar by midday when I start crashing, or carbs or whatever it is. And there's nothing bad about that. But if I were trying to lose weight, that's going to make it a lot harder because these are the things that I want. And unless I'm really, really cognizant of the fact that I'm staying within my caloric intake, I can have them, but they might take me out of my calorie deficit. Or by the end of the day, I might still be in a calorie deficit, but I still might be just like that much more hungry because my body is now looking for more energy because it didn't get the sleep that it needed. So these are things that we need to be cognizant of. If you're a new mom or having kids that don't sleep, like you don't have control over that, but be cognizant of your your sleep routines. Are you getting interrupted sleep but still going to bed at 11 o'clock at night? Or if you're anticipating that you're going to have interrupted sleep, go to bed a little bit later or start your bedtime routine a little bit earlier so that you can set yourself up to still get like an adequate amount of sleep at least. And then same goes for stress management. If you think about women who are going in menopause, who are going in menopause, who are going through menopause or who are perimenopausal, there are a lot of women who blame menopause for weight gain. And there is a lot of research and new research that's coming out that's saying like that's actually not the case. Like your hormones changing during perimenopause is not directly causing weight gain, which is what a lot of people think is happening. It's actually influencing your behaviors that are now changing, and that is causing you to gain weight, or that is causing you to have more difficulty to lose weight. And you think about people in perimenopause, they are having trouble sleeping. They are usually the generation that are between taking care of parents and taking care of kids, so they're more stressed out. And these two things have been highly proven to influence the behaviors we have during the day. Maybe we're moving less, maybe we're eating more than we think that we are because we're using food as a clutch, or we're requiring more energy because we're not getting the sleep we need, and therefore we are taking ourselves out of a calorie deficit. So these are things to be aware of. These are things to understand about yourself, to really get cognizant of and notice in yourself, so that you can understand where the problem might kind of lie. So that being said, let's get into movement. Movement is different from exercise. And so again, going back to the TDEE chart, movement is what makes up your NEAT, the 15% of your TDEE. So 15% non non-exercise activity thermogenesis versus the 5% of exercise, the exercise activity thermogenesis, right? So movement is the unintentional kind of movement that you are implementing throughout the day. So this is outside of your exercise routine. So maybe you do exercise. You have like an exercise regimen. You train 5 to 6 days a week, whatever it is. I don't actually recommend 6 days a week, but there's a lot of women who are saying that I train 5 to 6 days a week and I still can't lose weight. This is because your training routine, as great as it is for so many different reasons, is not actually contributing to overall fat loss as much as you think it is. What is really helpful for fat loss is concentrating on how much movement you're still getting outside of that exercise routine. I still want you to keep that exercise routine, but I want you to increase the amount of movement that you're getting throughout the day outside of that exercise routine. So don't go to the gym 5 or 6 days a week thinking that that's enough and then you're sitting on your ass the rest of the day. We want to make sure that we are taking movement breaks. We want to make sure that we are getting an adequate amount of steps, not just for fat loss, but there's so much more benefit to making sure that we are moving. There was a study, it was a meta-analysis that came out in like 20 ooh, 2019 maybe? 20 to 18. I have to look it up. But it was a meta-analysis, which if you don't know what that means, it basically means that what the research was pulling from all kinds of different research projects, all kinds of research papers. So this was not just one said research, like piece of research or experiment or anything like that. It was pulling from many multiple different kinds of research papers and things like that. And what this meta-analysis found was that walking and getting a certain amount of steps, and I think the highest, or like the kind of magic numbers, was between like 7 to 15,000 steps a day. Those people, like that group of people that were meeting those requirements and actually up, like especially the people who were hitting like closer to 15,000 steps a day, they were reducing all cause mortality by like, I feel like it was like 60%. Don't quote me on this. It was a huge number. And what, if you don't know what all cause mortality is, it just means that they were reducing their risk of any kind of death by a significant percentage. And that was because of their how many steps a day that they were getting. Now, understand that with research, correlation doesn't always equal causation. So it might not have necessarily have been the 15,000 steps that they were getting. It could have been because they were not only highly active, but also eating really well and, you know, all of the other things. But the people that were getting more steps were reducing the percentage of all cause mortality. And I think that's like incredible information to have, and just knowing that moving your body is so beneficial in so many ways, but it will also make fat loss that much easier if you are making sure that you are not sedentary outside of your exercise routine. Just because here we go, drink break, sorry. Um there are people out there who work out 5 to 6 days a week, and they are still only getting 3 to 5 thousand steps a day, and that would actually put you in a more sedentary category, which might piss a lot of people off to hear, but it's true. So I think the next step for that, if you're getting 4 to 5 thousand steps a day, the next step that I would recommend is just trying to increase that. There's no magic number. I mean, the more it's proven that, or has been kind of noted that, getting about 7,000 steps a day is where you really start to see an increase in benefit. And then there's that whole idea of getting 10,000 steps a day. And now that, not that it's necessary, but it's a really great number to reach for. For a lot of people, it's easy to remember. And you're right in that kind of threshold of 7,000 to 15,000 steps a day, that you're going to see the most benefit. So usually recommend for my clients aiming for 7,000 at the very, very lowest, and 10 to 12,000 at the high. Like, I don't put a highest number. Like, the more steps you can get, the better, really. But a minimum of 7,000 steps a day on like the low end. So if you're having a rest day or whatever it is, still try to get that 7,000 steps, just because there's so much benefit to it. Um, so if you're somebody who is getting 4 to 5 thousand steps a day, work your way up to 7,000 steps a day, work your way up to 10,000 steps a day. And the more steps that you can get, the easier it is to see the progress when it comes to fat loss without having to take out more calories. It's so much harder. So there's a lot of people who'll try a certain amount of calories, and they're, after a couple of weeks, they're like, it's not working, so they'll cut it and they'll cut it and they'll cut it. It's so much harder to eat less and be in a bigger calorie deficit than it is to move more while sustaining the same amount of calories. So that's what I would recommend, is understanding that this amount of movement that you're doing outside of your exercise routine makes up for 15% of your total daily energy expenditure. If you are moving more, you're going to be expending more energy, which helps to create more of a calorie deficit without you having to actually eat less. There's so much beauty in that. There's so much it's just like so much better. And someone from like myself, who is a very petite person, if I want to lose fat, like I'm eating like somewhere between 1,400 1,500 calories a day, I don't want to eat less than that, because that's already hard as fuck. So I'm going to move my butt more. So, anyways, there's just like so much to be said about movement and how much that can help, and how much that can influence how much energy you're actually expending to help you with fat loss. The next thing that I would recommend is looking at your protein and your hydration. So, both for a couple of different reasons. Protein is out of the three macronutrients. So, if you haven't listened to my macronutrient episode, go back and do so. But there's three macronutrients: there's protein, fats, and carbs. Out of all three, protein is takes the most amount of energy to break down. So, if we look again at the total daily energy expenditure, we have which is over here, and that takes up 10% of your total daily energy expenditure. So that's your thermal. I keep forgetting what this one's called. The thermal effect of food. That's what it is. So protein has the highest thermal effect, which means that your body requires more energy to break it down whenever you consume it. Not only that, protein is helpful with muscle protein synthesis. So if you are weight training while you're trying to lose fat, the protein is going to support that weight training by allowing your body to build that muscle. So that, and also your body's not going to take away from that muscle as you're trying to lose weight. And that's not, because that's not what we want. We don't actually want to lose muscle and fat. We want to lose as much fat mass as possible while we maintain muscle mass. And that's for a number of different reasons, because for most people who like want to tone or things like that, that's essentially what that is. It's maintaining your muscle mass while losing the fat mass, and then you get that kind of toned, sculpted looks. That's how you reveal abs. Like, that's all of that stuff. But then there's also the physiological benefits of it, like protecting your bones, being stronger. It's correlated to longevity. and like being able to maintain your level of independence and all of those things. That's where muscle mass is really, really important. And that's also why protein is so important, because it's going to be helpful in making sure that your body is not pulling from that muscle mass, but mostly pulling from fat mass. And then in addition to that, it has the added benefit that if you're eating an adequate amount of protein, your body's going to be burning more energy because of the thermal effect that it requires in order to break that protein down. Hydration is the other thing as well. So not just helpful for the obvious benefits of being hydrated, but also keeping your belly full. Drinking water is it's volume. It's going to fill up your belly, so it's easier to stay full if you are like adequately drinking enough water and drinking consuming enough liquid. It's also helpful from a digestive perspective and just making sure that everything can get broken down efficiently and all of those other benefits. Another one is your environment. And I think this one is another one that kind of goes under the radar, is people are not aware of how much their environment actually impacts them. It's a lot harder to lose fat when your environment is filled with palatable foods. Palatable, which are usually calorically dense foods. Chips, chocolate bars, your kids' snacks and things like that. Like those are easy to munch on. Um, and it's easy to let it kind of get away from you in a way that's going to now negatively impact the progress that you're going to have when it comes to fat loss. Not only that, but like just like your overall quality well-being too. And again, like I'm not against any of these foods. I think they're all delicious and they have a time and a place. But filling your environment and having these things in your environment is just going to make health and fitness a little bit more difficult, in the sense that it's going to take away from your fat loss progress, especially if you're not portioning it out or anything like that. um, but it also impacts inflammation. It also has many other impacts in terms of like mental clarity and things like that. It's much, much, much easier to be in a calorie deficit if you are prioritizing and fueling your body with whole nutrient dense foods. Not only will it actually keep you full, because fruits, vegetables and things like that are a lot more voluminous, like there's a lot more volume to it, meaning that you can fill your belly and have large quantities of it without having the added calories. It's going to help you to feel full even though there's not a lot of calories to them. um but it's going to benefit you by giving you like a sustainable amount of energy. Your digestion is going to be better because you're getting more fiber in. um, your health markers are going to be better. You're going to be sleeping better because of all of these other factors, right? So having those whole quality nutrient dense foods is not just important from a well-being perspective, but it will make fat loss that much easier. Palatable foods, again, like are great in moderation, and if you enjoy them, like you can fit them into your calories, but make sure you're weighing them out and portioning them out and sticking to that serving size that you're kind of allotting for yourself. And understand that you're probably not going to feel very satisfied out of it, and in terms of like hunger and appetite, and that it's really just for taste. That's all it really is, right? Like there's no nutritional value to these things, but it's purely for enjoyment and purely for that taste, and that's fine. But don't make up most of your diet out of those kinds of foods. So switching your environment and filling your environment with the choices that are going to help you to stay in alignment with your goals is going to be that much helpful. Keeping water on hand, keeping your water jug like where you can see it so that you're constantly drinking, keeping palatable foods out of the house. I know kind of to some people that might sound drastic, but honestly, it's a game changer, because when you're looking for it, you now have to go to the store and get it. And if you have to go to the store and get it and it's not as easily accessible to you, you're less likely to have it. My husband and I don't keep ice cream in the fridge, just because like if it's there, we're more likely to overconsume on it or have it more often than we really want to. So we like to kind of just when we want ice cream, we just go and get the small like pint sizes and for a treat if we want to, but we have to make the effort to go and get it because we have to really want it to go and get it. And so things like that is just it can change how easy fat loss is for you. And the same goes with, again, like maintenance and muscle building too, right? These things are all adaptable to those phases. And of course, if you're in a maintenance phase or in a surplus, you can allow yourself to have more of those palatable foods because you can have more calories, or like your body's going to require more calories to stay within those thresholds. And that's totally cool too. But again, you want to think about the well-being perspective of like how those foods actually make you feel. How do they impact your digestion? How do they impact your energy? How do they impact your mental clarity and things like that? Because they do have an effect on those things, and those are all like a consideration. I actually had somebody ask me the other day if I eat red meat. I know this kind of sounds random, but it got me into thinking like I don't cut anything out of my diet. Even when I'm in a calorie deficit, there's nothing that I really cut out of my diet. And if I can fit it into my calories, I will. Um, there might be things that I might find aren't worth it because I want to be in a calorie deficit and I want to get in and get out kind of thing. So eating certain foods might not be worth it for me for that temporary season. Um, and so you just have to kind of think of that trade-off, right? Is it worth it for me to eat this right now? Like, did I already eat off track? I don't like saying that word, but did I already eat out of alignment yesterday? And do I want to really continue into that today and be less consistent? Or, I enjoyed this piece of food yesterday or earlier today. If I have this other piece of food more for enjoyment than anything, that's going to bring me out of my calories. Is that really worth it for me? So you have to think about those trade-offs, and then when those times and places kind of are, in order for you to choose like what those foods are going to look like and what's going to help you to stay in alignment with your goals. Um, but yeah, like essentially I don't cut any the only foods I cut out of my diet are the foods that I just don't think are worth it anymore. And that's the trade-off for me. I love shrimp, for example, but shrimp does not love me. My body does not love shrimp. Um and so that has been something that I've cut out of my diet. I don't think I actually have an allergy to it. I think I'm just highly sensitive to it. But if I go to a restaurant and there's shrimp in a meal or something that I want, I will request something else and say like I am allergic to shrimp, and it's because it's that detrimental to my digestive system. So it's just things like that. It's not really necessary to cut out any foods from your diet in order to lose fat, but be cognizant of how it impacts you and make the decision from there of whether or not it's worthwhile to actually consume based on your goals, based on how it makes you feel, and like all of those things. You might actually find that there will come a time that you will have a highly palatable food that maybe you used to enjoy all the time, and you might not actually find it as satisfying as you used to because you don't have it as often, and it just doesn't taste as good. It's not satisfying you as much as it used to. Um, and that can come with various reasons. The last thing to kind of understand is your expectations of fat loss. So, again, if you're going through all of these things, there's going to be times and places where you're not as consistent as you want to be. And that's okay. And it's not that you're doing anything wrong. It's just that sometimes life happens. Sometimes it's harder to be in a calorie deficit. Sometimes you go through seasons where you really can't concentrate on being a calorie deficit as much. And that's okay. And it's okay to recognize it. It's okay to kind of be like, you know what? I'm just going to take a break from my calorie deficit for now and eat at maintenance, maybe focus on my movement, maybe focus on my training and building some muscle. Um, but as far as a calorie deficit goes right now, I maybe don't care about it as much. So that's okay to like take a step back and just kind of like readjust your goals for a little bit and focus more on your well-being, and then try to dive into the calorie deficit a little bit more down the road, and you might find that you have like a new flame for it. I also find too that I I usually come to a point in when I've done a calorie deficit for a certain period of time where like yeah, like I just don't care as much, and because I don't really have like a ton of fat to lose. It's more just like a preference thing, and it's not really a health thing. But I usually get to a point where I'm just kind of over it. And at that point, I'll be like, okay, I'm just going to go into maintenance. I'm going to enjoy my food a little bit more. I'm going to expect that I'm going to gain a little bit of weight, and that's okay because this is going to allow me to push more in the gym, to have more energy. I can build some more muscle mass, and that's cool. And then, after another certain period of time, then I might be like, okay, I'm ready to go back into a calorie deficit again and kind of get in and get out. So this is kind of encapsulates the things that will be helpful if you are specifically trying to lose fat. But again, like some of these things can be adjusted depending on if you want to gain muscle and be in more of a maintenance phase versus if you're trying to lose fat. But keeping all of these things into consideration will be really, really helpful in terms of fat loss. And these are also things that I go through with my clients to kind of audit what's going on and what could be actually impacting their calorie deficit if they're not seeing the progress that they want to see. So again, the other expectation being you're not going to be losing, most people aren't going to lose more than a pound every week, depending on how accurate they are and how big of a deficit that they're in. Some people also don't want to lose 1 pound a week. Some people want to go as slow as half a pound a week. So, in that case, instead of eating 500 calories less than what you need in a day, you would eat 250 calories less than what you eat in a day. So, same kind of thing, same kind of mathematical equation that can be helpful when it comes to more sustainable weight loss. I would also put the expectation on that it's probably going to take longer than you think. It's pleasantly surprising when you lose weight as quickly as you want to, but don't put that expectation on. Don't put a timeline on it. Just kind of give yourself a time frame of how long you want to be in a deficit for. So maybe it's like 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks. As long as you think that you could like mentally hold that capacity for, and then whatever you lose is what you lose, and that's amazing. It's still progress regardless of how much you're losing in a given like period of time. But if you can commit 8 weeks of being in a consistent accurate calorie deficit, you're probably going to see more progress than you would if you were to kind of willy-nilly be in a calorie deficit here and there for over like months and months and months at a time. So anyways, I think that's it for me. I think that's it in terms of like what I wanted to talk about here. If you find this helpful, please, please, please let me know. Please leave a comment. Please leave a 5-star review. Please share this podcast to anybody that you think might find this helpful. Um, so again, kind of going over like for fat loss, you want to be in a calorie deficit. If you're tracking, make sure you're doing so accurately. If you make sure you're doing it consistently, use a consistency calendar if you need to, like print out a blank calendar, put it on your fridge, put like a check mark every day that you hit your calorie deficit. Um, all of those things. Um, Manage your sleep and stress management. Make sure you're moving, eat your protein, get hydrated, pay attention to your environment, and just make sure you're not putting like unrealistic expectations on yourself. So, anyways, that's it from me today. Please leave a 5-star review. Please leave a comment. Please share. Please message me if this is helpful. I appreciate any feedback at all that I can get. Um, but yeah, I hope that everybody has an amazing day, and we'll see you next time.